I'll never forget the sound of that slap echoing through our front yard. The sharp crack that made my blood run cold when I saw the red handprint blooming across my wife Sarah's cheek. She stood there, trembling, holding our 6-month-old daughter Emma against her chest, while this wannabe cop in a fake security uniform sneered down at her like she was nothing. "Next time, maybe you'll think twice about defying the HOA," he said, adjusting his plastic badge with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. But here's what this pathetic excuse for a man didn't know. What none of them knew. I'm Commander Marcus Chun, Navy SEAL Team 6, with 15 years of active duty and more classified operations than I can legally discuss. I've taken down actual terrorists, led rescue missions in hostile territory, and protected this country in ways most people will never understand. And this piece of garbage just put his hands on my family as I watched him swagger back to his golf cart, completely oblivious to the storm he just unleashed. I felt that familiar calm wash over me, the same deadly focus that had served me in Afghanistan, Syria, and countless other hellholes around the world. They wanted to play games. They had no idea what game they'd just started. 6 months earlier, life was perfect. Sarah and I had just welcomed our daughter, Emma, into the world, and we'd finally found our dream home in Willowbrook Estates, a beautiful suburban community about 20 minutes from the naval base where I was stationed. After years of military housing and constant deployments, we were ready to put down roots. The neighborhood looked like something out of a magazine, perfectly manicured, lawns, tree-lined streets, and houses that screamed American dream. The realtor, a bubbly woman named Jennifer, had gushed about the community amenities. "Oh, you'll love it here," she'd said, gesturing toward the pristine playground and the sparkling community pool. "The HOA keeps everything absolutely perfect. It's like living in a resort." I should have recognized that as a red flag. The first few months were blissful. Sarah was on maternity leave, spending her days with Emma while I handled my duties on base. Our neighbors seemed friendly enough. We'd wave to the Johnsons next door, chat with the Martinez family across the street about their kids' soccer games. It felt like the kind of place where you could raise a family, where your biggest worry was whether to plant roses or tulips in the front garden. Sarah threw herself into nesting with the enthusiasm of a woman who'd spent 3 years moving from base to base. She painted Emma's nursery in soft pastels, planted a small herb garden by our kitchen window, and even started a neighborhood book club. I'd come home from training exercises to find her on the porch, Emma in her arms, talking excitedly about her latest project. "Marcus, I found the most beautiful wind chimes at the farmer's market," she'd say, her eyes lighting up. "They'll look perfect hanging from the oak tree out front." I loved seeing her this happy. After years of uncertainty, of never knowing when I'd be deployed next, we finally had stability. We had a home. But paradise, as I've learned in my 15 years of military service, is usually an illusion. There's always someone waiting to exploit your peace, to turn your sanctuary into a battlefield. I just never expected the enemy to be wearing khakis and wielding a clipboard. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. Sarah brought it to me over coffee, her brow furrowed as she read the official-looking document. "Honey, what's a notice of violation?" she asked, sliding the paper across our kitchen table. I scanned the document, my jaw tightening with each ridiculous word. According to the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, we were in violation of Community Standard Section 4.2.7, unauthorized garden modifications. Our crime, Sarah's herb garden. Apparently, the small plot of basil, rosemary, and mint she'd lovingly tended for months was considered an aesthetic disruption to neighborhood harmony. The fine was $300, due in 10 days. "This is insane," I said, setting the letter down harder than necessary. "It's a herb garden, not a junkyard." Sarah's face fell. I thought it looked nice. Mrs. Martinez said she loved the smell of the rosemary when she walked by. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Don't let these bureaucrats make you think otherwise." But that was just the beginning. Over the next month, the violations came like artillery fire. Our mailbox was 2 inches too far from the curb. The small American flag I'd hung by our front door was improperly sized per community standards. Sarah's bird feeder was creating wildlife disruption. Each violation carried a fine ranging from $100 to $500. The worst part wasn't the money, although the fees were adding up fast. It was watching the joy drain from Sarah's face each time another envelope arrived. She'd gone from excitedly planning improvements to our home to second, guessing every small change. "Maybe I should take down the wind chimes," she said one evening, bouncing a fussy Emma on her hip. "I don't want to cause any more trouble." "No," I said firmly. "Those wind chimes make you happy. They stay." But the HOA had other plans. The harassment escalated when I was away on a 2-week training exercise. Sarah called me on day 3, her voice shaky and small. "Marcus, someone came to the door today. He said he was from HOA security. He took pictures of our house, measured our fence, and told me I needed to comply immediately with all outstanding violations or face legal action." My grip tightened on the phone. What did he look like? Big guy, maybe 6 feet, wearing some kind of security uniform. He had this badge that looked, I don't know, fake. He was really aggressive, Marcus. He scared Emma. She's been crying all afternoon. I could hear our daughter's wails in the background, and something dark and cold settled in my chest. "Did he threaten you?" "Not exactly, but Marcus, I'm scared. When you're gone, it's just me and Emma. What if he comes back?" That night, I made a decision that probably saved someone's life. Instead of flying home and handling this security guard the way my training suggested, I called a lawyer. Tom Bradley was a former Marine JAG officer who specialized in HOA disputes. His first words after hearing our story were, "Commander, we're going to bury these people." But even Tom was shocked when we discovered the truth. The security guard who'd intimidated my wife wasn't employed by any legitimate security company. His name was Derek Paulson, and he was the HOA president's nephew given a fake badge and uniform to intimidate residents into compliance. "This isn't just harassment," Tom explained during our video call. "This is fraud, impersonation of a security officer, and possibly assault if he threatened your family." I felt that familiar calm settling over me. "What do we do?" "We're going to file complaints with the police, the state attorney general, and the Better Business Bureau. But first, I need you to document everything. Every letter, every fine, every interaction." When I returned from training, I found Sarah a shadow of her former self. She barely left the house, kept the curtains drawn, and jumped every time a car pulled into our driveway. The vibrant woman who'd been planning garden parties and book clubs had been replaced by someone who looked over her shoulder constantly. "They came by twice while you were gone," she whispered as we lay in bed that first night back. "The fake security guy and some woman with a clipboard. They measured our grass height, took more pictures. The woman said if we don't pay all the fines by next week, they're going to put a lien on our house." I pulled her closer, feeling the tension in her shoulders. "That's not going to happen. I promise you, Sarah. They're not going to take our home." But the HOA wasn't done. They were just getting started. The next morning, I found a new notice on our door. This one was different, more official looking, with legal language that would intimidate most people. It claimed we owed over $2,000 in fines and late fees, and warned of immediate legal action if payment wasn't received within 48 hours. I was reading the notice when I heard Sarah's voice from the driveway, tight with fear. "Sir, please, I already told you we're working with a lawyer." I looked up to see Derek Paulson, the fake security guard, towering over my wife. Sarah was holding Emma against her chest, backing toward our front door while this wannabe cop gestured aggressively with his clipboard. "I don't care about your lawyer, lady. I care about compliance. You think you're Special. You think the rules don't apply to you. That's when I stepped outside. Paulson barely glanced at me, too focused on intimidating my wife to notice the 6'2" Navy SEAL commander approaching from his blind spot. Big mistake. Is there a problem here? I asked quietly. Sarah's relief was palpable. Marcus, he's demanding payment right now. He says, if we don't pay immediately, they're going to start seizing our property. Paulson finally turned to face me, and I watched his eyes widen slightly as he took in my bearing, my posture, the way I carried myself. Most people can sense when they're facing someone who's seen real combat, even if they can't articulate why. You must be the husband, he said, trying to regain his composure. Your wife here seems to think you're above HOA regulations. My wife, I said, emphasizing each word, is a law-abiding citizen being harassed by someone impersonating a security officer. His face reddened. I am security for this neighborhood. No, I interrupted, pulling out my phone. You're Derek Paulson, nephew of HOA, President Linda Whitman, and you're not licensed, bonded, or authorized to represent any legitimate security company. The color drained from his face. He hadn't expected that. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered. I stepped closer, just close enough that he had to look up to meet my eyes. When you've spent 15 years in special operations, you learn to project authority. Without saying a word, the way you stand, the way you breathe, the absolute stillness that comes from knowing you could end a threat in seconds if necessary. Here's what's going to happen, I said in the same tone I'd used to brief missions. In hostile territory, you're going to leave my property. You're going to stop harassing my family. And if I see you within 50 feet of my wife or daughter again, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation. Paulson's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. You're threatening me. I'm informing you, I corrected. There's a difference. He backed toward his golf cart, trying to salvage some dignity. This isn't over. The HOA has legal authority. The HOA, I said, has about as much legal authority as you do. Which is to say, none. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought showing strength would be enough to make them back down. I was wrong. 2 days later, I was in my home office reviewing case law with Tom when I heard Emma crying from the front yard. Not her usual fussy cry, but the sharp, panicked wail that every parent knows means something is wrong. I was out of my chair and moving before I'd consciously processed the sound. Military training takes over in moments like these. Assess, react, neutralize threats. But nothing could have prepared me for what I found. Sarah was on our front lawn, cradling Emma, tears streaming down her face. Derek Paulson stood over them both, his fake badge glinting in the afternoon sun, his hand still raised from where he'd struck my wife. The red mark on Sarah's cheek was already darkening into a bruise. You will respect the authority of this HOA, he was saying, his voice loud enough for the neighbors to hear. No one is above the rules, especially not some military wife who thinks. He never finished that sentence. I've been trained to kill with my bare hands. I've eliminated targets in 17 countries. I've led missions where failure meant American hostages died. But in that moment, watching this coward standing over my traumatized wife and infant daughter, it took every ounce of self-control I possessed not to end him right there. Instead, I walked slowly across the lawn, my steps measured and deliberate. Paulson turned when he heard me approaching, and I saw fear flicker across his face before arrogance took over again. Your wife needs to learn some respect, he said, puffing out his chest. I'm authorized to use necessary force to maintain order in this community. You just assaulted my wife, I said quietly. I defended myself when she tried to grab my citation book, he lied. She's lucky. I don't press charges. That's when Sarah spoke up, her voice shaking but clear. I never touched him. Marcus, he demanded I pay the fines right now in cash. When I said I didn't have cash, he started yelling about how military families think they're entitled to special treatment. I told him to leave, and that's when he hit me. The rage that coursed through me in that moment was unlike anything I'd felt even in combat. This wasn't about mission objectives or national security. This was about my family, my wife, my infant daughter who was still crying in her mother's arms because some wannabe cop thought he could intimidate them. I stepped close enough to Paulson that I could smell his nervous sweat. When I spoke, my voice was so quiet the neighbors couldn't hear, but every word carried the weight of 15 years of special operations training. "You have 10 seconds to get off my property," I said. "If you're still here when I reach 0, I'm going to demonstrate exactly what military training looks like." He tried to bluster. "You can't threaten me. I'll call the real police." "Please do," I said. "I'd love to explain to them how you've been impersonating a security officer and just committed assault and battery." For a moment, we stood there in absolute silence. Then Paulson's nerve broke. He stumbled backward toward his golf cart, muttering threats about lawyers and consequences, but his hands were shaking as he fumbled with the keys. As soon as he was gone, I knelt beside Sarah, gently examining the bruise on her cheek. Emma had calmed down, but Sarah was still trembling. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I tried to stand up to him like you said, but he just got so angry." "You did nothing wrong," I said firmly. "This is not your fault." That evening, after Sarah and Emma were asleep, I sat in my home office and made a series of phone calls. The first was to Tom Bradley. They crossed a line. I told him, "Physical assault. I want to destroy them." "Commander, I need you to think carefully about your next move," Tom cautioned. "These people are clearly unhinged, but if you handle this wrong, you could face charges yourself." "I'm not talking about vigilante justice," I said. "I'm talking about using every legal tool available to bury them so deep they never resurface." "In that case," Tom said, and I could hear the grin in his voice, "let's go to war." The second call was to my commanding officer, Captain Reynolds. I explained the situation and requested permission to pursue legal action that might generate media attention. "Marcus," he said after a long pause, "you know I can't officially endorse anything, but unofficially, these people assaulted a Navy family. Make them regret it." The third call was to someone I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Jamie Chun, no relation, despite the name, was an investigative journalist who specialized in exposing corruption in suburban communities. She'd won a Pulitzer for her series on municipal fraud in Arizona. "A fake HOA security force," she said when I finished explaining. "Marcus, this is exactly the kind of story that needs to be told. How deep does this go?" "That's what we're going to find out," I said. Over the next week, while Sarah recovered from her assault, both the physical bruise and the emotional trauma, I launched a campaign that would have made my SEAL teammates proud. It was time to show the Willowbrook Estates HOA what happens when you target a military family. The investigation began with public records requests. Within 48 hours, Tom Bradley had filed requests with the county clerk, the state corporation, commission, and the Attorney General's office. What we discovered was a web of corruption that stretched far beyond our little neighborhood. The Willowbrook Estates HOA wasn't just corrupt, it was criminal. Linda Whitman, the HOA president, had been embezzling funds for 3 years. The community pool that was supposed to be renovated last year, the money had gone into her personal account. The landscaping budget, used to pay for her daughter's wedding. The security contract with Derek Paulson, a complete fabrication designed to funnel more money to her family. But that was just the beginning. Jamie Chen's investigation revealed that Willowbrook Estates was part of a larger scheme involving 12 neighborhoods across 3 counties. The same management company, Pristine Communities LLC, was running identical scams in each location. Fake fines, fraudulent security contracts, embezzled maintenance funds. They'd stolen over $2 million from homeowners across the region. "Marcus," Jamie said during our third meeting, "this isn't just about your neighborhood. This is organized crime disguised as suburban administration." Meanwhile, Tom was building our legal case with military precision. He'd documented every violation notice, every fraudulent fine, every instance of harassment. He'd interviewed neighbors who'd been too intimidated to speak up before, collecting stories of elderly residents bullied into paying thousands in bogus fines, young families driven to bankruptcy by escalating penalties for imaginary violations. The turning point came when we discovered Derek Paulson's criminal history. Our fake security guard had been arrested twice in the past 5 years for assault, once for check fraud, and had been fired from 3 legitimate security companies for aggressive behavior. The HOA had hired him knowing his history, specifically, because they wanted someone who would intimidate residents. "This is it," Tom said, spreading the documents across his conference table. "We have them on fraud, embezzlement, assault, criminal impersonation, and conspiracy. But Marcus, if we're really going to destroy them, we need to go public." That's when Jamie's story broke. HOA horror. Military family terrorized by fake security in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. Ran on the front page of the state's largest newspaper. Within hours, it was picked up by national news outlets. By evening, our story was trending on social media. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone started ringing at 6 a.m. with calls from reporters, lawyers representing other victims, and federal investigators who'd been tracking Pristine Communities LLC for months. Sarah, despite everything she'd been through, handled the media attention with grace and dignity, telling our story in a way that highlighted not just our experience, but the systematic targeting of vulnerable residents. "They didn't just go after us," she said during her interview with the Morning News. "They targeted elderly people on fixed incomes, single mothers, anyone they thought wouldn't fight back. We were lucky. My husband has the resources and training to stand up to them. Most people don't." But the real moment of justice came 3 days later. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard the sirens. Through our front window, I watched as police cars surrounded Linda Whitman's house across the street. Derek Paulson was led away in handcuffs from his apartment complex. By noon, the entire leadership of the Willowbrook Estates HOA was under arrest. The charges were extensive: fraud, embezzlement, criminal conspiracy, assault, impersonation of a security officer, and violation of federal racketeering statutes. The FBI had taken over the investigation, treating it as organized crime rather than a local dispute. That afternoon, Tom called with news that made everything worthwhile. "Marcus, you're not going to believe this. The state attorney general is filing a class action lawsuit against Pristine Communities LLC on behalf of all affected homeowners. They're seeking full restitution for every fraudulent fine, every illegal fee, and punitive damages for emotional distress." "How much?" I asked. "Preliminary estimates suggest $12 million. And here's the best part. Every fraudulent fine and fee charged to residents over the past 5 years is being refunded with interest." But the most satisfying moment came that evening, when there was a knock at our door. I opened it to find Mrs. Martinez from across the street, tears in her eyes, holding a casserole dish. "Commander Chin," she said, "I wanted to thank you. Last month they fined my husband $800 because our fence was supposedly 6 inches too high. We were going to take out a loan to pay it, money we didn't have. My granddaughter needs surgery, and that $800 it would have meant choosing between the fine and her medical bills." She handed me the casserole, her hands shaking slightly. "They're giving it all back, every penny, plus damages, because you and your wife stood up to them." Similar visits continued throughout the week. The Johnsons brought flowers and thanked us for exposing the fake security patrol that had been harassing their teenage son. The elderly couple at the end of the street stopped by with homemade cookies, explaining that they'd been too scared to use their own backyard because of constant surveillance and threats. "You gave us our neighborhood back," Mr. Peterson said, his voice thick with emotion. "For 3 years, we were prisoners in our own homes. The media attention continued for weeks. Our story became a cautionary tale about HOA abuse, spawning congressional hearings and new legislation, protecting homeowners from fraudulent associations. Sarah was invited to testify before a state Senate committee, her bruised cheek serving as powerful visual evidence of how far these criminals would go to maintain control. No family should have to live in fear in their own home, she told the senators. No parent should have to explain to their children why strangers are taking pictures of their house, making threats, demanding money for imaginary violations. The legal proceedings moved with unusual speed. Within 6 months, every member of the criminal conspiracy had either pleaded guilty or been convicted at trial. Linda Whitman received 5 years in federal prison. Derek Paulson got 3 years for assault and fraud. The management company was dissolved, its assets seized to pay restitution to victims. But perhaps the most satisfying outcome was the transformation of our neighborhood itself. 1 year later, Willowbrook Estates is unrecognizable from the place we moved to 18 months ago. The fear is gone. The constant surveillance has ended. Children play in front yards without parents worrying about violation notices. Neighbors actually talk to each other instead of walking quickly past, afraid to draw attention. We formed a new HOA, one with strict transparency requirements and community oversight. Every meeting is public. Every expense is documented and approved by majority vote. The security budget goes toward actual safety measures, better lighting, a neighborhood watch program run by volunteers, not intimidation tactics, run by criminals. Sarah has healed, both physically and emotionally. The bruise faded within 2 weeks, but the confidence took longer to return. She's gardening again, expanding her herb plot into a full vegetable garden that she shares with neighbors. Emma, now walking and babbling constantly, loves playing in the front yard without anyone measuring the grass height or counting the number of toys on our porch. The financial restitution was substantial, over $40,000 for our family alone, covering every fraudulent fine plus damages for emotional distress. We used part of it to install a security system, not because we're afraid, but because we've learned the value of documentation. The rest went into Emma's college fund, but the real victory isn't measured in dollars. Last weekend, we hosted a neighborhood barbecue in our backyard. 30 families showed up, including people who hadn't spoken to their neighbors in years because the previous HOA had actively discouraged community gatherings. Children ran through sprinklers while parents grilled burgers and shared stories. Mrs. Martinez brought her granddaughter, the one who needed surgery. The little girl is healthy now, playing with Emma and the other toddlers, completely unaware that her medical bills were almost compromised by criminals pretending to enforce community standards. You know, Sarah said as we watched the kids play, this is what I thought we were buying when we moved here. A real community. She's right. We thought we were purchasing a house in a well-managed neighborhood. Instead, we ended up buying our way into a criminal enterprise. But by fighting back, we didn't just save our own family, we saved an entire community. The experience taught me something I hadn't learned in 15 years of military service. The enemies we face overseas are obvious. They wear uniforms, carry weapons, and openly declare their hostility. But the enemies we face at home are often harder to identify. They hide behind clipboards and fake badges, using bureaucracy as a weapon and intimidation as a tactic. They count on people being too busy, too trusting, or too afraid to fight back. They prey on the natural human desire to avoid conflict, to pay the fine and hope the problem goes away. They especially target military families, assuming we'll be too often deployed to mount effective resistance. They were wrong about us, and they were wrong about our neighbors. Sometimes I think about Derek Paulson in his prison cell, probably still wondering how a simple intimidation visit went so catastrophically wrong. He thought he was dealing with just another scared military wife and her absent husband. He had no idea he just assaulted the family of a Navy SEAL commander with 15 years of experience in high-stakes conflict resolution. But here's the thing. You don't need special operations training to fight HOA abuse. You need documentation, legal representation, and the courage to stand up to bullies. Most importantly, you need to remember that your home is your castle, and nobody has the right to terrorize you in your own kingdom. The Willowbrook Estates case led to legislative changes in our state that make it much harder for criminal organizations to masquerade as legitimate HOAs. Other states are considering similar laws. The federal racketeering convictions sent a message to fraudulent management companies nationwide. Abuse homeowners at your own peril. As I write this, Emma is napping in her crib, the gentle sound of Sarah's wind chimes drifting through the window. Those wind chimes that started this whole nightmare are still hanging from our oak tree, chiming softly in the afternoon breeze. But now they're a symbol of victory rather than defiance, a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things in life are worth fighting for. Our herb garden is thriving. Our American flag flies proudly by our front door. Our mailbox is exactly where we want it to be, not where some criminal with a measuring tape thinks it should go. And if anyone ever wants to challenge our right to live peacefully in our own home, again, well, they know where to find us. But somehow, I don't think that's going to be a problem.